I have a copy of what's required in the bond by hand, writing anywhere. Got one, right?
Then the bond.
Do you have a copy of the bond handy? Hard copy? Thank you, Anna.
This is corn-free.
Thank you very much.
You got the Sam and Idaho is about right here if you went through Sam and Idaho. So you probably went
Middle.
you okay. I don't know how you go from here to there. I know they fly a lot in.
What is this one called?
Does that sound good to committee members? We go ahead and get started?
South.
Okay. Okay, welcome everybody to the COSAC meeting, our August 7th meeting. Hopefully folks have had a chance to take a look at the agenda. Any changes from staff on the agenda?
No.
Okay. Any questions or concerns from committee members on the agenda? If not, without objection, we'll adopt the agenda for today. And then item 2, approval of agenda and minutes. Approval of minutes. Hopefully folks had a chance to take a look at those. Come on in, Claire. I think we got you over here.
Over here.
So on the minutes, did anybody have any comments on those? Megan, I did see on the minutes of the earlier meeting.
June 26th.
Yes.
Okay.
If you'll take a look at those, right there, actually, on item 3. I have to put on my sunglasses since they're prescription. Okay, yeah. Under where it says Sands nominated Eric Elison.
I have Harris nominated Chris Sands as chair. Rayfield seconded, passed 5-0.
Correct. The next line there, Sands nominated Eric Elison as vice chair.
Okay, I'll make that change.
Yep. And then, can you scroll down a little bit? Next. Oh, yeah. On number 7 there, it says Tingey informed the committee that Garth Baxter has contacted staff with interest in applying for funding.
Okay,
He's not applying to the COSAC, like to be a member or something like that, but he's applying for funding.
okay, made those changes.
Okay, awesome. Those are the only 2 things I saw. Anybody else have anything else? Okay, then without objection, we'll adopt those 2, the minutes for those 2 meetings. Okay, we're up to item 3, sponsor agency presentations Q&A. Are we ready for that,
Give us just a second.
folks? Maybe while we're waiting to get going on that, appreciate Annika getting some of the criteria and initial application stuff out to us last week. I know Claire chimed in a little bit on some scoring for the Lisa tab. And then this morning, I finally finished up putting all my thoughts together and sent out copies with my edits in there. So hopefully you've had a chance to see those. I know it was kind of last minute, but anyway, just putting my 2 cents in on the various components, which we can discuss later on the agenda.
You want to hit the map while we're, oh, she's
I was-
probably the same.
I was
person. We
gonna-
didn't need that.
Right. I was going to ask, we could jump to item 4 if you want, or if you prefer, we can wait.
Okay, I think we're almost ready.
Okay.
Okay, Jeremy and Scott, can you hear us?
Yes, that's much better.
We got a few things echoing, but we'll fix that.
Okay, so I think we're ready. So,
Great.
Jeremy, if you want to go ahead and present first, you are able to share your screen, and we have some TVs up so they can see what you're presenting as well. So, take it away.
Okay, Jeremy, if you'll keep speaking and see if we can hear you.
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So if you'd like to go ahead and present.
Go ahead and present. Okay, go ahead. Want me to go ahead?
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Go ahead, share my screen. All right, that's all right.
Are you guys able to turn up that TV a little bit?
What we're trying to do.
Okay.
Okay, can you guys hear me and see my screen?
We can see your screen. We're trying to figure out how to turn the volume up.
Okay. Let me know when I should go ahead. Go ahead.
I think we got multiple mics and multiple sound devices.
Keep talking if that's helpful while you're configuring the figures.
I think we're set now.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for inviting me to come speak. My name is Jeremy Christensen. I am the Land Conservation Program Manager at UDAF and oversee the Lee Ray McAllister Fund, although that may overstate my importance there since there's a 13-person board that actually votes on the administration of that fund, but we'll get into that. So appreciate the time to come talk about our program and about easements in general. I was told I have about 5 to 7 minutes, so I'm going to kind of speed through the presentation in hopes that we have a minute or two at the end if there's any questions. But you know, when I took this job, they asked me what my agricultural background was, and I told them I've never farmed a day in my life, but that for 40 years I've been a committed consumer of agricultural products. And as Wendell Berry put it, you know, eating is an agricultural act, so we all have a stake in this. And I really agree with what Leopold wrote, and that conservation will ultimately boil down to rewarding the private landowner who conserves the public interest. And I think that really sums up the agricultural conservation easement program and conservation easements in general. So let's talk a little bit about easements 101. It's such a powerful tool, first of all, because it's voluntary. You know, this is a legal agreement between a landowner and another entity that permanently limits the use of the land in order to protect its conservation values. The tool offers great flexibility in that, you know, it can provide a permanent guarantee that the land will not be developed, but allow for continuing uses. So for example, an easement on property containing rare wildlife habitat might prohibit any development, while an easement on a farm might allow for continued farming and the building of additional agricultural structures. Easements are perpetual. They generally last forever. And they run with the land. They're binding on all heirs, assigns, future owners of the property. Easement can't be extinguished or amended except by judicial proceedings. However, they're not immune to condemnation, which is an important thing to keep in mind. Conserved properties can still be passed on, mortgaged, sold, etc. So why would somebody donate an easement on their property? Well, landowners, as we know, have a really deep connection to the land, and they usually know that land better than anyone else. So they also know that undeveloped properties provide gifts to their communities for future generations, including clean air and water, fresh food, wildlife habitat, scenic beauty, etc. Additionally, if the donation benefits the public and meets other federal tax code requirements, it can qualify as a tax-deductible charitable donation with the IRS. The amount of the donation is the difference between the land value with the easement in place and the value without the easement. So for that federal tax deduction, the landowner can deduct between 50 and 100% of their AGI, and that deduction can be carried forward for up to 15 years. So that can be beneficial for some landowners that do have a tax liability. In order to deduct 100% of your AGI, you need to be a qualified farmer or rancher, as defined by the IRS. And then for properties with really extraordinary conservation values that significantly contribute to the public good, there is funding available to compensate the landowner for the value of their easement. This could include the Lee Ray McAllister Fund, NRCS, ASEP ALE funds, county rollback taxes, county bonds, etc. But funding is generally limited and highly competitive. So most easements are either donated or sold in what's called a bargain sale, where the landowner receives less than the full appraised value of their easement and then donates the remainder of the value as a charitable donation. In order to do that, it must comply with IRS regulations. So what are some of the rights and responsibilities of the landowner? They retain ownership and control of the property, they manage it, they retain all rights not conveyed in the easement. Public access is not required. They just have to notify the easement holder before undertaking any new activities and allow for a yearly easement monitoring. The rights and responsibilities of the easement holder are to monitor the property for compliance with the easement, enforce the term of the easement, and then consider and approve or deny any requests by the landowner for new activities. So what's the process? Anybody can really scribble something down on paper. They could go down to the county recorder's office and put an easement on their property. But where it gets a little tricky is if you want funding or to be compensated for that easement, you need to jump through the hoops. So it really starts with some soul searching and asking yourself some questions. You know, do you really want to get the greatest return on your property, or do you want to continue living and working on the land? Is it important to know that the land will stay as it is? What rights do you wish to retain? What are you willing to give up? And then you need to assemble your team. It's really imperative that anyone undertaking this process seek qualified legal and tax advice. Nothing in this presentation should be construed as such. And you also need to determine who the easement holder will be. That's a really important relationship going forward, since these are perpetual. Land trusts and governmental entities are the most common easement holders, but the easement holder must have the organizational mission, the resources, and the capacity to monitor and enforce the terms of the easement in perpetuity. Then you need to identify and define your conservation values. You know, in order to qualify for state, federal funding or for tax incentives, the easement must protect some clearly defined conservation value or purpose. So some of the recognized conservation purposes include outdoor recreation or education for the public, protection of relatively natural habitat for wildlife or plant species, preservation of open space for scenic enjoyment, or pursuant to some clearly delineated governmental conservation policy with public benefit, which is generally where agricultural easements fall, in addition to having a lot of these other benefits as well. And then there's easement provisions for cultural and historic structures as well. So once you've kind of identified what you're preserving and who your team is, identifying potential funding sources and understanding their varying requirements. So funding for conservation easements is generally very limited and highly competitive. So different funding sources have different requirements, which could impact how the transaction is structured. Projects seeking funding take significantly longer to complete than donated easements. So for instance, a donated easement you could probably undertake in a year's time, whereas a project seeking state or federal funding, it might take 2 or 3 years to consummate. There's a lot of due diligence involved. The landowner will need to work with their easement holder to undertake a complete due diligence review of the property, title report, surveys, water, mineral, all that stuff, as well as an appraisal. And the costs of that due diligence are generally associated, generally the responsibility of the landowner. And they can be significant. So that's one of the hurdles that we see in doing an easement is the upfront cost to the landowner. Some cost assistance may be available through the land trust or through other private funders, but again, that's generally pretty limited and also highly competitive. So drafting the easement deed is a really important part of the process. This is the document that really guides the landowner's use of the property going forward and guides the holders monitoring and stewardship of the property. So it's really important to get that right. Conservation easement documents that endure and are enforceable for perpetuity require a certain amount of flexibility and fortitude to be successful. There's requirements for baseline documentation, appraisals, and then what it comes down to at the closing table. An easement is pretty much a real estate transaction, but you're only giving up certain rights as opposed to the entire property. So at the end, it comes together at the closing table, and the money changes hands, and the landowner still owns the property, but is tapped into some of that equity that they have there that they can put to use for other purposes. So one of the funding sources that's available out there for people undertaking conservation easements, specifically agricultural leaning easements, is the Lee Ray McAllister Working Farm and Ranch Fund through the Department of Agriculture and Food, previously through the Quality Growth Commission. So this uses funds appropriated by the legislature to purchase conservation easements on private property. Conserved properties, provide numerous other public benefits, including scenic open space, wildlife habitat, and the preservation of cultural and historic resources. Eligible applicants for Lee Ray McAllister include cities, towns, entities within DNR, other Utah agencies, and trust, and other organizations that qualify as C3. This year in our cycle, we've got a total of $3 million available to be awarded. The application period started in June, and we've closed it for this cycle with 9 applications that we've received, totaling about $3.8 million requested. So we're in the process of filtering and ranking those proposals and coming out with our awards later this fall. So UDAF in this process, we can assist with the application process. We've got some planning expertise. We can help with the due diligence. And then UDAF and or Land Trust becomes the responsible holder of the easement, responsible with it. Some of the ranking criteria that we look out for these projects, whether they have local support, the effect on housing affordability, adjacency to other conserved properties and other important landscapes, cost effectiveness and the leverage of the dollars, the urgency, obviously other public benefits, so on and so forth as we're going through the ranking. And one of our goals and what was given to us by the legislature was to create a ranking system that is substantially similar to the NRCS ACEP program as well, so that those can become, partners and matching funds for each other, so that a project that applies for one can hopefully get the other as well. Eligible projects for LERAY, you know, again, ensure local control, protects private property rights, you know, can't be used in conjunction with the threat of eminent domain. Only really tries to preserve unique and irreplaceable properties. We really want to try to leverage the funding as much as possible. And the lands, you know, need to remain in a natural or open or agriculturally productive state in perpetuity. And easements will generally be held by UDAF or another entity within DNR or a land trust once the easement is conveyed. This is kind of the workflow for the Lee Ray McAllister grant. We've got a pre-application that was in June 1st. Applicants submit a pre-application, and then they're either invited to proceed to the full application process, or they're deemed ineligible for one reason or another and told to reapply next year. We're in this kind of second phase where projects are now preparing their full applications. We're doing site visits, trying to rank and score those projects before we proceed to our awards phase later this year. Just an example of one of our kind of marquee properties in our easement portfolio is the Kohler Dairy up in Midway. It's really a gateway property. It's highly visible. It's a generational family-owned dairy with, you know, just significant support for the community to preserve this property. The project was highly leveraged. The cost share for Lee Ray McAllister was pretty low. And, you know, maybe most importantly, this property and this operation really anchors the agricultural economy of the Heber Valley and really creates an incentive for more properties to be conserved and to contribute to that agricultural economy. So that's it. I'm not sure where I'm at time. Looks like I'm pretty good. If we have a couple questions or anything, I'm happy to answer that, but I can stop sharing, and if there's anything else you'd like me to head back to or answer questions, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. I think Dave has a
I'm
question.
sure we'll have a few questions. Let me ask a couple first, Jeremy. Is the evaluation criteria that you guys use and the application materials, is all of that publicly available?
Yes, absolutely. If you go to our website at ag.utah.gov and navigate to the Conservation Division page and find the Lee Ray McAllister page, I can drop a link into this chat here in a minute. But yeah, you'll find all of the application materials, the grant manual, all of the information is fully transparent and available to review.
And you may be aware of what we've got going on up here in Cache
Yes.
County. So our voters have passed a bond, and our committee's been formed, and we're getting underway, and we're developing our evaluation criteria and our application materials, that sort of stuff. And you know, some of the questions or comments that have come up in our discussions thus far, as Lee Ray McAllister, as your program does, and I think as our program will, you know, we want to look at a variety of criteria, and you mentioned in your presentation things like water quality, wildlife habitat, those kinds of things. But given you know, your program's managed by UDAF, and there is an agricultural component to it. What's your take on how much agriculture is weighted in that score for your program, or, you know, your particular criteria?
It's weighted really heavily, and again, it looks at a lot of the similar things that NRCS looks at, but, you know, prime soils, the soil characteristics and makeup, whether those have been mapped and they're, you know, kind of statewide importance, and a variety of other, you know, agricultural factors that weighed in. So a project with no agricultural component would have a very hard time, I think, ranking against projects that do. So, that again is available on our website. You can look at the various rankings. We tried to make that more user-friendly by reducing what the landowner or the producer has to come up with and present to us in the application. So there's a portion of the application that is filled out by my staff, by our easement planners. It goes in and looks at some of the technical information about soil compositions and things like that, precipitation, highly erodible soils, things like that NRCS looks at as well. And that all factors in quite heavily.
Great. Okay, I'll let other committee members ask questions. Dave, you had your hand up.
Jeremy, does Leroy McAllister require that other fundings come in first before McAllister shows up?
That is kind of a tricky timing thing. So we do require matching funds, but when they're secured is kind of up in the air because there's a number of different, scenarios by which when you're applying to Leroy McAllister, you may not have those matching funds, 100% secured. So we just kind of work in good faith to make sure that those sources are identified and that, the applicant is working towards getting those funding sources secured. And then if your project is committed through Leroy McAllister with funds, you have a 2-year window from the time that the funds are committed until you need to complete the project. And so if during that time, part of it is spent securing those additional funds, that's okay as long as that is proceeding. And then obviously if those matching funds are not secured, then the Leroy funds would be decommitted. But we try to work with folks on those timing issues and really not be hard and fast to say they have to be 100% committed by the time you apply to Leroy. And we're actively working, you'll hear from Scott Morton in a minute, but we're actively working, trying to collaborate on how we can improve the process on both of our ends to better, sync up and make that a little bit clearer for applicants that are seeking, funds from multiple sources. So.
Great.
I've got a quick
Eric?
What is your average check size?
So, I just started in this position in April, and last year, Leroy McAllister did not have funds to give out. So, this is a new process for me. We have $3 million. The average request is about $500,000 in this funding cycle. Anything requested over $1 million needs to go through a separate process where it goes to the Conservation Commission for a discussion from them, and then they make a recommendation whether or not we should fund the project over $1 million. However, we have an independent board that's not bound by the determination of the commission. It just has to go there for discussion and their input. Then land conservation ultimately has the authority to make that determination.
Great. Claire?
And that all comes from statute. So.
Go ahead, Claire.
Jeremy, Claire Ellis, you
Yes,
mentioned
sir.
you got $3 million to spend and applications are 3.8. Do you expect more applications? And if you don't spend all the 3 million, or do you need to spend it all this year, or would you wait maybe for some higher quality applications?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be based on the quality of the application, so we don't feel compelled to have to spend it regardless. So that money can roll over as far as I understand. We do have we have got about 200,000 that rolled over from a previous year, and so we actually have about 3.2 to give out this year. But yeah, it'll all be based on the quality of those funds. I do anticipate that we will give out the full 3 million just based on my preliminary examination of the applications. They all seem to be pretty high quality. We did have one of our 9 initial applicants drop out already because they just heard that they would not receive the matching funds that they had kind of hoped for and anticipated. So they told us they're going to pull out and reapply next year. And hopefully that comes together for them. So that whittled it down a little bit for us. And then we're going to have some tough decisions to make on the remainder of the projects. But I do anticipate we'll get all that 3 million out But, you know, if for some reason we don't, then that can carry forward for us.
Great. Other?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Our charter, I think, extends beyond agriculture into like corridor and viewscapes and trails
Sure.
and things like that. Are those factors also weighed in on Luray McAllister, or are they not so much?
Not so much, just because when the program was reconfigured and moved from quality growth over to UDAP, it was given this real agricultural focus. That's where the legislature has really pointed us to focus our efforts. So whereas the previous Quality Growth Commission and the Lee Ray McAllister Critical Land Fund, which is what it was called before, would consider and fund applications for recreation projects and different things like that. We do now have this agricultural focus. However, one thing in our ranking that does weigh in is kind of multi-benefit, you know, projects that not only have the agricultural component, but can demonstrate a very clear wildlife benefit or scenic open space component, which honestly most agricultural easements can. You know, just by nature of these type of projects, you know, if you conserve a big piece of property, you're going to also have some of those other ecosystem service benefits come along as well. So being able to identify and you know, elaborate on those is really helpful in terms of kind of demonstrating that multi-factor benefit for the project.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned in your presentation, you know, if a project doesn't really have any or a strong agricultural component, it's not likely to be applying to Lee Ray McAllister, right?
With one exception, in that there is a piece in the statute that says, you know, a certain portion of Lee Ray McAllister funds after, you know, if there's additional funds that are kind of left over after the agricultural projects have been funded or considered, that, you know, a percentage can go to wildlife related projects. So we do have that in the statute as well, that does, you know, commit a certain percentage of Lee Ray in certain circumstances to wildlife related projects. And then, you know, kind of secondarily, but we also can fund restoration projects on properties that are conserved. So if we have a conservation property or another, you know, conserved property, we can fund restoration projects for projects that enhance or restore the conservation values.
Great. Okay, committee members, any other questions, Dave?
Jeremy, will your
Yes, sir.
will your funding continue on annually, or you got to reapply every year?
So right now we're in flux. We do not have an ongoing appropriation yet. So the 3 million was a one-time appropriation. We're just starting to work, you know, building block requests and things for this next legislative cycle, and we're going to be asking obviously for an ongoing appropriation. So, you know, talk to your legislators, talk to your representatives, and if this is something you support, then please make sure that they know that they have your support for funding the program.
Great. Anything else? So thanks very much, Jeremy. It's really helpful to hear about the UDAF, their program, Lee Ray McAllister funds, and I think for the benefit of the committee members, I mean, the purpose of having folks like Jeremy and Scott come and present to us is to give us sort of the background on their programs and what potential funding partnerships may be out there to help guide our work, I think, and as we continue to refine our evaluation criteria and our process, you know, that hopefully they will dovetail well with these other programs, because of course we want our dollars to be leveraged as much as possible. So
that's exactly right. You know, and we look at initiatives like your bond as just a great opportunity for matching funds for our program and just to help each other in this. And so, like I said, you know, we strive for transparency and accessibility. You know, we're public servants, so please reach out with any questions. We're just happy to be involved in any way we can that can help benefit this work that we're all doing. So thank you guys for the invite.
great. And just to add to that, you know, for the committee members, you know, our intention is to, to continue to bring in other organizations and agencies over the course of our series of meetings and continue to gather that information from them. Claire, go
Can I
ahead.
throw one more question in?
Sure.
The 3.8 million, is that the McAllister share? And if it is, what would the total funding be for those projects?
That's a great question, and that is the McAllister share. So we have about 3.2 to give out. We've got about 3.8 in requests. I would say the average cost share is probably about 25% for these applications. So, that represents a $12 million, conservation investment from the $3 million from Lee Ray, which is pretty substantial, so.
Great. Excellent questions, folks. Okay.
And one other,
Go ahead.
point of clarification when we're talking about matching funds for these programs, a landowner donation of a portion of an easement is considered matching funds. So if their easement is worth $1 million and they get $500,000 and they donate the other $500,000 in value as a charitable donation, that counts for Lee Ray McAllister as matching funds. And there's, quite a few incentives to do that if that is works for that particular project. So.
Great.
Can I ask one more?
Go ahead, Claire.
Ballpark figure, what would be the typical total cost of the easement for all of the funding partners compared to the purchase price of the land? Is there a range or
okay, ask that one more time.
what would be the cost of the easement purchased, conservation easement, compared to the outright purchase of the land?
Okay, got it. So yeah, the way we determine the value of an easement is we look at the value of the property in the before condition, unencumbered, and then we look at the property based on the restrictions that are contained in the deed and try to establish what the value would be with those easement conditions in place. And the difference between the before and after value is the value of the easement itself. So, you might have a $2 million ranch and the easement might be worth, $700,000 or something like that. And then, Lee Ray can pay up to 50% of the easement value as a grant. So our grants cannot exceed 50% of the total easement value of that 700,000. But generally our cost share is much lower than 50%, generally around 25% or so. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was kind of looking at the 700,000 compared to 2 million. Is that typical, or like for the Kohler property, was it more than that? Or?
There's really no typical because it's so tied to the individual factors of the property and then also the individual factors of the easement. So there's no, one size fits all deed terms, although, NRCS has its own deed terms, minimum deed terms that they need to be put into the easement document. But beyond that, it's really guided by the landowner. So, one landowner might retire all of their development rights, whereas another landowner might reserve a building envelope on which to build a future second home. So the difference between those reserved rights is going to dramatically affect, the end value of the easement. But I can say that, typically we'll see a diminution in value from between, 20 to 40% or something like that in terms of how much value you diminish by placing easement. You'll see some that go above that, but if you have an easement that is showing a diminution in value of above 50%, it should be probably highly scrutinized because that's rare to see one like that. But so
great. Excellent. Well, thanks for your time, Jeremy, and
you're very
the
welcome.
presentation.
Thanks for the opportunity. Hey, Scott, take it away.
We'll be, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you soon in the near future.
Hey, thanks very much.
Okay, Scott, you're up.
Excuse me. I was quiet for a while. Sorry about that. I didn't put a presentation together because I was told I only have about 5 minutes to present. So then Jeremy did put a great amount of information that's similar to ours. And I will follow up with a presentation for you guys to look at on I plan on doing that next week. We have somebody else building an overview of ASAP program for us to present to the partners. So, thank you, Jeremy, for doing a lot of that presentation and a lot of the similarity between Leeway McAllister and our ASAP program, especially the one we call ASAP dash AL, which is agricultural land easement, resembles what UDAP is trying to do on the Leeway McAllister funds. From there, I wanted to quickly discuss our cost share and overview of what our program really is. And the most important part that's been a heavy conversation between all the partners is the timeline. So from there, I'll discuss some of the programs, and the one that most of our applications for Utah assist with is called the Agriculture Conservation Easement Program, and it's under the ASAP-L. And I actually put in some web link addresses onto this chat box for you guys to look at, and I'll send it over by email to, forgive me if I mess up the name, Annika.
Annika, yeah.
But in the long run, American Farmland Trust, we have partnered up with them to do an outreach and help partners and landowners understand our ASAP-L program. So the link is on this website. I will follow, I have the link on the email to send to Anika after the meeting. So it's very in-depth, it's very user-friendly, and it really tells both the partners and the entities what to expect and how to get ready for the application period. So then I wanted to quickly cover the IRA side. So we do have the regular sign up for ASAP-L, and we have the sign up for the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that's tied to ASAP-L as well. That's gonna have a lot of significant amount of money. So this year we receive additional $250 million through the IRA International Headquarters. Next year, I believe the amount that they're gonna add on is about $400 million, and it's gonna continue to increase for the next three to 4 years. So please keep an eye out for that. We will be advertising for ASAP-L IRA as well. But overall, our ASAP-L program is tied to a 50% cost share for a regular agricultural land easement. On the easement value, so basically, if the easement value is $1 million, we'll cost you $500,000. It'll be up to the partners to come up with the remaining amount, and we do allow an in-kind contribution or donation from the landowner to take, for the landowner to donate all of the value for that 50%. But the easement value will start at 50% for the agricultural land easement. There's another program with it, and I'll have it spelled out in the presentation next week as well, when I send that PowerPoint slide out. It's called ASAP-L-GSS, and that is grassland of special significance. And that is, we cost share 75% cost share on that, of the easement value. So the $1 million on the GSS, we'll do $750,000, up to $750,000. And our priority areas or habitat areas we're focusing on will be tied towards sage grouse habitat. And a lot of my applications are tied to the sage grouse habitat. And it seems like the average easement cost share request is about $2 million to $3 million for one particular GSS application or for a regular ASAP-L. So about $2 million is what I'm seeing the last couple of years. So that gives you the ballpark. And it is a perpetual easement. So we operate on that. The people that can apply for the program. So similar to Lee Ray McAllister, the state, local, or tribal agencies can apply, as well as the non-government organizations like Area Bear River Land Conservancy, Trout Foundation, and those particular people, as long as they have the authority to be able to hold the easement. So, and I emphasize that because some game and fish departments don't give authority to allow them to participate in the AL program, but they may be allowed to participate in the GSS program, the Grassland Special Significance. So it's important to pay attention to who has the authority to hold what type of easements when it comes to state or local agencies. The average closing time, right now nationwide, it's about 19 and a half months. That is better than last year. As you can see, when I say the next one, last year is 22 months of average closing time. And that's, we're improving on the closing request. What I say about the closing request is it can take up to 18 months to close on it. That's the agreement side. But it will all depends on how clean the title report is, how clean the boundary is, the legal description, and how long it will take to get the conservation deed to an agreement point between the landowners and the partners. So it seems like most of the time, the title report is what's taken up most of the time. And then the second is the legal description issues, cleaning up the border, the boundary. The timeline for the sign-up period to help try to market your timeline. This year, still working with the state con for the final permission. We are looking at to have the sign-up period to close for fiscal year 24 to be on the third week of October or the first week of November. So that the partners or the agencies can submit the applications at that time, up to that time to participate in fiscal year 24. And we're hoping to make a selection by February 15th. However, we're doing the eligibility cutoff on February 1st, meaning that they met all the criteria between the FSA and NRCS programs. Some of the matching funds you can use with our programs is the state programs, NIFWIF, landowners donation, and so on. On that point, the only federal program that we can technically directly match with is what we call the REPI program, REPI. And that's a DOD, Department of Defense program, and that's the only one we're allowed to match with federal funds. So that's the overall view of our ASAP-L program. I'll re-emphasize that our cutoff for this next year's funding will be either the third week or the first week of November. The eligibility deadline for the land and the partners to meet all eligibility will be February 1st. And the selection will be February 16th. My goal is to have all that done by that time so I can submit a request for additional funds by March 1st. Last year, we received an original allocation of $4.8 million. I requested additional funds, and I'm now up to $7.4 million. I'm hoping I get another $1 million by in a couple of weeks. So that's the average fund that we've been receiving, is like $4.8 million under the ASAP program. I'm gonna expect a lot more money from the IRA AL program. So they are working on trying to give us the allocation on that, and I won't see it till next, probably November on that part. With that, I know I kind of went over it pretty fast and didn't have slides for you, but I will have the slides ready for you next week. But, you know, I at least wanted to give you a timeline, because it sounds like that's pretty heavy conversation, is what is the timeline? So with that, I'll open up some of the questions.
Great.
And go from there.
Thanks, Scott. And similar to questions I had for Jeremy, NRCS has their own application program and their own evaluation criteria, correct?
Correct.
And all of that information is publicly available.
It's publicly available. We are working to update the information this month.
And would you say, you know, the NRCS programs are kind of weighted more towards agricultural conservation easement projects, or, you know, similar to the Lee Ray McAllister, or are there other components, you know, outside of agriculture that you guys might fund a project for?
Great question. It is heavily weighted towards agricultural land easements. And grasslands can be determined as agricultural land because you use native grasslands for grazing cattle and livestock.
Great.
So pretty much 100% levy to that. We do have another program, it's wetland reserve easement, but it's not very common. And it has to be an agricultural land to be converted back into wetland. It is not a popular program in Utah because, one, there's not a lot of land that truly qualifies for that. Two, per cap for a per acre basis on that is $5,000 per acre for 80% of the easement value. So the 5,000 is cut off, and nobody would talk to us on that.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Dave.
Scott, do ASAP funds require funds from other sources first or before?
So yes, it requires funds from other sources. You know, kind of like what Jeremy said, we can be flexible where there's a letter of intent in place. Some type of letter of intent saying you qualify, we plan on giving the funds to them, something like that. But our number one adult requirement is the trust must show proof that they could, well, doesn't have to show proof, but must accurately check off saying that they have the funds available. How they have the funds available, we won't question that part. Because it's like an honor system, and by signing that 41 form 8, excuse me, application 41 form, you're legally saying that, yes, I have the funds available. How you have it, you'll have it breaking down in the letter, in the application. But some of the, comments I made is, well, I've heard is, can we use a letter of intent from a county commission or from a NIFWF, National Wildlife Federation program? So something like that. As long as they have it in hand, as a form of proof that they have funds to back it up.
So you would accept a letter of intent from a county, right?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Scott, committee members? Okay, doesn't look like it, Scott. We appreciate your time and insight and,
One more thing I forgot
Sure.
to mention, and I'll release it in the email, and I have the link on here. Please consider, looking into RCPP program. And I add the link on here. This is a regional conservation partnership program, and we can match up to, it's a 50-50 match up to $25 million. And they have talked about considering covering due diligence costs in that as well. As the final outcome of what kind of due diligence costs they have not released to us, but $25 million is significant, and if they're considering due diligence costs, that's additional information that would be helpful for the partners to know.
great.
What program is that?
That's all I have.
What was that program one last time, Scott?
It's called RCPP, Regional Conservation Partnership Program.
Great.
Okay, and it looks like Jeremy raised his hand, so go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Thank you. Just to follow up on what Scott just said, one of the biggest hurdles for people undertaking a conservation easement project is the upfront due diligence costs. So you could be talking tens of thousands of dollars for a conservation easement appraisal. You've got legal fees, tax advisor fees, you've got baseline surveys, physical boundary surveys, phase one environmental reports. All of this stuff needs to be compiled and perfected. And that's a big burden for these landowners who may be agricultural operators working on, season to season, working at a loss each year. And so one thing you might consider with the bond money, and this is just a personal idea, not, the position of UDAP, but is some assistance for the upfront transactional costs incurred by people undertaking these easement projects. And the way that land trusts and other groups sometimes handle this is with the type of revolving loan where, you could have a contract that says the county will agree to pay for or provide expert services in this regard for this due diligence. And then when they close on easement and the landowner gets funds from Lee Ray McAllister and from ASEP ALE, they can turn around and make whole the county for the funds that were borrowed to do the due diligence. In the case that the easement fails to close, they would generally be required to pay back any costs incurred back to the fund. So a portion of this bond money could be set aside to purchase easements, and then a smaller portion could be set aside for this transactional assistance. And, if it was managed properly, it could self-sustain itself as a revolving loan fund, and the interest, earned off of that could pay for additional loans in perpetuity. That's how a lot of the land trusts and stuff handle that. So just one idea. Thought I'd throw that out there as you're considering different ways to administer that. And just thanks again. I'm going to go ahead and pop my contact information here in the chat. Again, if anyone wants to pull that up, we're here to answer any other questions. I know, speak for Scott as well.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. And thank you, Scott. We appreciate it. We appreciate your time.
Same. Take care.
Okay, moving along, our next item on our agenda is item 4, the map with ag remainders and protection areas. What did you want to
Yeah,
talk
so
about
just
with that?
really quick, Carrie updated the map we've had laid out last time, so it's all up to date. And I put in a little guide if you're confused on how to use the interactive map, on how to change layers, what the layers mean, where to find different sub-layers. So it's all in there for your information.
It was very helpful, thanks.
Yes, you're welcome. So I don't want to take too much time because I know we have a lot of important things today.
No, that's great. Sounds good. Any questions on that, committee members? Okay, well, let's get into discussing our evaluation criteria and applications. Do you want to take it from here, Annika, or?
So this first one, I forgot to print this one out, so you'll have to look at this screen. But it's very simple. It's the level 1 application. So when we have
Can
an
I have you
interested-
just zoom in or widen that out? Yeah, thanks, great.
have someone interested, this will be the first thing they fill out. Basic questions: is it in the county? Are you a willing landowner? Does the property or properties have clear titles? Who's the owner? Property
What do we mean by
information.
clear title there?
I got these questions looking through all the other applications that I brought in last time, and they all had that, so I'm not exactly sure what that means, but they all had it.
I think the thing we'd be concerned about is if there's another entity that may have claim on the property, like if it's under a mortgage or if there's like a family.
Well, but if it's under a mortgage, would that be excluded? Because
No.
most farmland has.
It should not.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
I just think it'd be good for
That would be
us
normal.
to know if somebody else has claim that might be able to oppose putting this easement on. So we want to go too far into negotiations with this entity, not knowing that all the parties that have title on the property are involved.
I wonder if we ask for who that is, if they do. First of all, to let them know that they're not excluded necessarily if they've, again, most farming is done with some debt financing. That we ask who that is or something like that.
Probably need to know any other liens on the property.
Yeah.
I would just ask for any other encumbrances on the property.
The word might be clean title rather than clear. I think clear would be clear of liens, mortgage. Lien would be.
A clean
there's only
title.
one title.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not in dispute.
But I do think we would want to know if someone has a mortgage on it that's going to have to prove, like that decreases potential value on that property, are they? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Most applications for conservation easements require a clean title before they can do it because of
A clean or a clear?
clean.
But it could have some debt on it.
Yeah,
You-
But they
The
just want
bank, the bank would have to subordinate to,
right, exactly.
and the bank may ask for some of these funds to be given to them.
You have to remember, in a mortgage situation, they still have their own title. I mean, it's theirs.
Yeah.
They don't lose that.
Yeah.
But the other part of it, the encumbrances, can be a problem with what's going on there.
Good.
So it's just having them all involved.
Annika, you probably saw my 2 cents worth on the application. So on the application. Yeah, so I had a couple of wordsmithing things for those first items there. It's good faith negotiations as opposed to good fair negotiations. The one above, for example, and then on that same line where we're talking about clear or clean title, at the end there, the appropriate title and ownership are free of obvious problems.
Okay.
Was my suggested wording there. So I'm saying it out loud, not that you have to do it right now,
Yeah.
but just so
I'll
if
break
anybody
If
has
we were to do it
conflicts.
right now, then we could all agree to those
Yeah,
edits.
I'm mentioning it in front of everyone in case anybody has any problems with those suggestions or want to add on to it or whatever, so.
You have to remember, it's property rights that you're talking about. That's the only thing that's lost, is the property right, not losing the property itself.
Yep.
It stays with the owner.
Okay.
Okay,
I think you may also want to add that who is the authorized agent that has the ability to negotiate. We don't want some real estate agent, no offense to them, coming in and trying to negotiate this. It really needs to be getting back to the legal owner / authorized agent. It needs to be.
Should we ask that as a yes/no question? Are you the authorized agent?
we have under applicant information there, we have a a secondary contact person. And so that could possibly be reworded as a,
That's where it should say / authorized agent.
yeah, authorized agent, something like that. That's a good suggestion.
But we want to know, this is the property owner signing this.
Yeah. Not somebody dream chasing for a potential commission.
Good comment, Jody.
Yeah, so that kind of clears that up, and then they can select who that contact
options,
person is in
yeah.
the relationship.
That's
Do you
great.
want any others added to that list?
I didn't see any, you've got a space for an other there as well, so I think that covers the
Okay.
logical ones, is my opinion.
And then just additional contacts, and if they're working with a land trust, they can list it. Then there's a question, are you aware of any legal disputes or conflicts relating to the property or proposed project? If yes, describe.
What's the drop down there?
Yes or no.
Okay.
I kept it pretty simple.
That probably ought to go up under the clear title section.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
matches
It
with
could
those
sit under there,
That's
couldn't
really
it?
the intent of that clear
Yeah.
title suggestion.
There has to be an agent of the individual that's doing the application, like a land trust or the county. They have to be part of that, because like Leroy McAllister and other NRCS, they have to be listed as the agent first, not the person individually. It's the person doing the contract. That make sense?
Not really. Could you elaborate?
If you do a land trust and you're doing conservation easement, the land trust has to do the actual, all the closing and everything. The land trust does it.
The land trust takes the lead on
County,
that.
if they have a conservation easement, it has to be the county. They have to be the agent first. They're the ones doing the application or whatever.
And so, I mean, I think the way we have it worded and revised here would still work, right? A contact person, authorized/authorized agent. We want to know the property owner. They're going to be involved. There's a checklist for who this authorized agent is that should cover any of those options. So I think we've got it right. Does that seem okay?
I think, Dave, I think what you're saying, I caught it in the presentation, is the funders want to fund the money to whoever's going to hold the easement, not to the property owner.
Exactly. It
Okay.
goes through the agent, has to go through them to do the whole deal.
Yeah.
The agent's going to take the lead.
Yeah, and that's actually a person that's gonna come in here with
Appraisal?
not the appraisal, the
The application.
application is gonna be them. It's not gonna be us, it's gonna be them. And we're gonna look and see if we agree with that or not, but that's the one doing most of the work and everything is them, not us. And we just have to agree with the things we're talking about, that we're okay with that to accept this funding. But it comes from the applicant.
When you say us, do you mean property owners or this?
Property owner is gonna come through a land conservation or the county first. Because that's where the funding's gonna come from. And then we're gonna come and say, yeah, we agree with this and we'll help fund it. But it's coming from an applicant, not from us. We're not doing the application.
So do we want to have on here, who is the lead conservation purchaser or agent?
I think we have it.
You've got it.
Yeah. We have this on here.
It's on
We want
section
the.
C, right?
Yeah, we want the property owner information, but then we want the authorized agent or contact person information, and they can select who they are.
Is there any problem, because we have on there that the property owner could apply? Is there any reason a property owner couldn't apply in stage one? For example, the property owner applies in stage one.
You can apply, but you still have to go through a land trust, or you have to go through the county. It has to come through there.
Like stage one, we're not looking to finalize anything. We're looking to tell the landowner, hey, this looks like a good application, it
exactly.
scores well.
Yeah.
We recommend that you get with a land trust and continue the process.
Yeah, but again, we're not gonna say to the landowner that this is a great application. That should come from them. The applicant should come to us and approve that we agree that this is a good project or not. But you don't wanna walk through that process together. I mean,
I'm not proposing we walk,
Yeah,
that any way that COSAC walks through that process.
yeah, we should walk through whatever thing we're putting together. We should agree that this is a great project and how to put that together to say that so that we think it's a good or bad project. We should know, but it should come from the applicant.
Yeah, it doesn't, I think the direction we're going doesn't exclude a property owner from applying. It's just that at some point, let's say it's in stage 2, or at least by stage 2, they're gonna have to be represented by
Yeah, they gotta be represented, yeah. I mean,
organization or
mean,
somebody who's
Scott-
gonna hold the
yeah.
easement, a government entity.
I know you couldn't understand what Scott was saying. He's hard to understand, but the NRCS, what he's talking about, takes frickin' forever. I mean, it'll drive you to drink to do it. And they do it on purpose. I mean, he says, oh, it'll be 18 months? Never. Never. I mean, half the time, they don't even answer the phone, these guys. So, I mean, it takes forever.
Now that Regional Conservation Partnership Program, does that go faster because they've already made an agreement with Bear River Land Conservancy on that land?
No, the Bear River has done it, and they've gone through NRCS
Right.
already to
Right.
get the funding, but they started the process, and they're
That's what I'm
going
saying,
to.
is that a little further along at this point?
Yeah, if you're getting to the point where you're coming in and they want our money, or whatever you want to call it, they have to have that ready to go. Otherwise, we're gonna say, well, yeah, great idea, but let's figure it out.
So do we, on this section C, want to simply say proposed land trust agency and give us a name?
That would be a good thing to say. I'm trying to remember how Leroy McAllister used to do it. The land trust would do, I can't remember what their word was, the wording is how they put it together, that they were doing it, and right underneath would be who's the landowner, underneath them, and then the process would go through them, but they're the agent putting it together, Leroy McAllister.
And do we want realtor on this form?
Good question.
I don't think we do.
No.
Well, I mean, it's, the landowner gets to decide who they want to represent them.
Well, you can put that down under other, but I don't want a real estate firm thinking, hey, I'm gonna become specialized in doing.
Yeah, and I don't,
Off on the side, they're not.
They actually try to do that.
I don't disagree. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I do feel like, yeah, we have the information here. You can check that you're working with a land trust, and it tells you to tell us who that is. I think we got it covered.
Maybe drop realtor off the
Okay.
first item and make it a little,
Make it be an other.
make it a
Well, I think a realtor can
just
go in
so if
under
someone gets
other.
this application, they're a realtor, like, oh wait, here's opportunity.
Yeah, totally understandable.
Good. Okay.
Section D, so in this one, they describe their property, past and present uses. Are they aware of any toxic or hazardous material on the property? Is the property subject to any DEQ or EPA restrictions? What benefits will the public receive as a result of the proposed transaction? Are you proposing to open any portion of the property to the public? If yes, explain. Do you like, okay, let's stop there. Do we like these questions? Should we
I
change
think
any
this has
of
been
them?
reworded and I like that better. Explain.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I like them.
Okay,
I think it covers the salient stuff, gets people to start thinking about, okay, where's this application going, and what are the kinds of things they're going to be asked to provide information on.
On the benefits, I wonder if we ought to have a drop-down menu with our charter list of benefits there, and maybe in other, like ag trail,
They need to
whatever,
be able to choose multiples, right?
just so they
I
can
can do
see.
that.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Point in the right direction.
Education.
Or yeah, check, you have.
Yeah,
each of
check
them,
all that
check all
apply.
that apply.
Yeah.
So you have both section D and section E supporting documents. Maybe section D isn't a supporting document section, it's
Question
addition
on D.
Yeah,
or something else.
yeah, Annika, that needs to be reworded.
There's
Supporting documents,
Additional information.
Section D
heading?
may say additional information or further
Yeah.
questions.
Section D, maybe could we give that heading additional information?
Yes. Okay, yeah, I have that written down. Okay, so section E, supporting documents. If your pre-application is accepted, you will be asked to complete a final application with additional information. Check the appropriate box below. If you currently have any of the following, please do not send them at this time. Real estate listing, mineral rights, easement or right-of-ways, legal description, water rights, encumbrance, letters of support, relevant planning documents.
Maybe there, and I had made a suggestion that we include a current real estate appraisal as a question, but in light of the discussion, I'm wondering, like, we probably don't care if there's a real estate listing, do we? And that maybe a current real estate appraisal could replace that one?
The problem with going, because we're required to deal with real property. And we're talking that we may buy real property, which would require that, and that's,
A listing?
or not a listing, but I assume you'll have to see that or something. You'll have to deal with that.
that's an interesting, statement because we can do fee simple acquisition. Not that we will, we might in the case of trail work, but that's a different application altogether, but we could do that in land as well.
We could.
It'd be a unique situation, I think, and
Is there, so back to my comment though, does that have anything to do with the real estate listing item? Does anybody think
unless
that
there's
that's?
a piece of property that came up that's, the county wants, county executive comes and says, hey, we don't want this to fall in other hands, can we?
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess I'm having an issue with pre-application. If the pre-application is accepted, then we get this stuff.
Yes.
I don't think there could be a whole series of things based upon the pre-application, a lot more than this. I do think that as part of the pre-application, we would like to know if there was mineral rights that had been sold off, easements or right-of-ways that have been sold off. We'd like a legal description. We'd like to know what the water rights are, encumbrances. I think you want those as part of the initial
That
pre-application.
should be in your application.
Yeah.
If they're gonna do a conservation easement, that all has to be listed, exactly what you just said.
Yeah, and so, my thoughts, and that's a good point, Jody. My thoughts on this is kind of a checklist to give applicants a heads up of like what's coming. Like, if you haven't thought about the mineral rights status or your water rights status as part of this, you're gonna be required to provide that information. So that's kind of how I see this functioning, but yeah,
That's
just
what I
my
thought too.
it's kind of a heads up to the landowner, like, you should be thinking about these things, and there's more than on this list, obviously, but these are like the main ones that will affect value.
But I think just take out, if your pre-application is accepted, just if available, provide these. If readily available, or
I just think, my thought is, we don't need that stuff right now.
well, I'd at least want a tax notice to know how large the parcel is, what's the legal description.
Sure, but we can get that information, when they put the parcel numbers down. that's gonna trigger a certain amount of effort on staff's behalf.
Yeah, and that's
Like,
not
I
too much.
envision somebody, like, when we say we're ready with the level 1 applications, you know, we're gonna get 5 or 55, who knows, applications in or whatever, and then we're gonna use this information here, and it's probably, we're gonna take all these parcels, staff GIS, if we come up with like, the sort of level 1 scoring that we're talking about, here, all of that information can be generated by staff, and we can come back, staff can come back to us with a list of applicants and that initial scoring to look at, and then we can start digging into those, and presumably there'll be more applications than we'll want to go to the second level of application. And so that'll weed out some of the less than desirable projects or something, I think, for our funding. And then we're gonna get into a phase where we're gonna require all of that documentation and stuff like that.
If that's the case, can we delete past, starting at the word check, clear through all these check boxes? Why are we having them check these boxes? So where it says check the appropriate box below, why do we need that?
I think my response would be, they're giving us, or they're acknowledging that these certain items are gonna be part of this project. Or, you know, gonna be
Why do they
involved
need to
in it.
check them then, if they're not?
I think what it may do, where did we get this from? to start?
This one I think was Wasatch County had this part on theirs.
Okay. The only thing I'm thinking of, and I think you alluded to it, is, man, should I really apply because I've got this problem that I'm not acknowledging? Maybe it just lets them know I've got an encumbrance that I'm gonna have to
But you don't-
disclose.
But you don't ask that here.
Yeah,
Well,
I see your point.
I think it's helpful for us to know whether or not they have it without needing to waste time on reviewing it if they don't get past the pre-application stage. I mean, this is just their first application.
Yeah, and I'm just saying,
And-
we're just saying, hey, if the pre-application's accepted, you'll be asked to complete a final application with additional information. Period, stop, delete the rest.
Oh, you're just saying, leave it on there, but take away the check boxes.
Should take away the check boxes.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
If they're applying for conservation easement and they're putting together a conservation easement, everything you have on your box will be done.
Yeah,
So all you're saying is, have you applied for a conservation easement? And if you say yes, every list you have will be done. It has to be done. But the other part is the trails and all those other things are different. But the conservation easement, if they're applying with the land trust or with the county or whatever, let's see it, and everything will be there. It has to be. A yellow book appraisal has to be done.
That would be a good question to have on here, I think. If they're halfway through, they're just looking for additional matching funds.
but I would just say, take out the check boxes, and I agree with Chris. Let's get a real estate appraisal instead of a listing. If these guys are trying to sell it to somebody else, do we really want to be messing if we're going to be bidding against Ivory Homes?
In my,
It depends on the project, I guess, but yeah, I tend to agree with you, Jody. Like,
Part of what was talked about in their presentation is they kept talking about the closing costs. And when you go to apply to do an easement and stuff, you have to be able to have a closing cost. You have to pay for the appraisal, yellow book appraisal immediately to start the process. And you have to be able to say, okay, how are you gonna monitor these people and how are you gonna pay for that? And a land trust is gonna come in and they have to put that together and say, this is what's gonna cost. And that money has to come from them as part of the closing costs. Plus the title all that stuff has to be done as part of this application.
But I didn't really, I don't see how we can put together a perpetual land fund, or a perpetual loan fund, as he was suggesting, to do all that. That's definitely outside the charter that we've been granted.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah, what he brought up is that can a certain amount of funds be set towards, and Steve Daniels, who was on one of the co-chairs.
Land Conservancy, yeah.
Yeah, well, he was co-chair on this as well.
Right.
Suggested that in many respects, COSAC may, if they simply provided the money to do the transaction, may never have to front money for the transaction because there'd be enough matching funds elsewhere that you could actually complete a whole bunch of transactions just by funding the front end of things. I don't know that our language.
I don't think it does.
Has that in it. I know that it was greatly discussed, that it was, could you say the money is going towards the acquisition because it's going towards the process of getting it acquired? But that was, Steve was pitched the county on that.
A revolving loan fund would be great for that. And it's, if we could do that, but I think it's a legal question.
Well, I think it's a legal question, but it is going towards the acquisition of the property.
Yeah.
Of the easement of the property. That funding is.
If the conservation easement, they're gonna require that immediately, because they're gonna have to do the Yellow Book appraisal. They're gonna have to do the title. They're gonna have to upfront that cost on their own. Either have to do it individually, or you have to come to you and say, hey, we need this, to start this project, this is what we need to do. And you have to agree it's a good project for us, or it isn't. And that's another question, is it a good project or not, if you're gonna put money out?
Okay. So back on this section E, Jody, remind me what you were suggesting we strike out?
I just take the check boxes out.
Okay.
And the recommendation to check the boxes.
So we're simply saying you will be asked in the final application for these things?
Yes.
Point one, that's it.
And you need to have language that says some of these items
That-
or all of them. You
well,
will be asked to complete a final application with additional information.
That includes.
That may include, and just list them out, right?
That may include, but is not limited to.
Yes, yes, that's the clarifier.
Okay, great.
Okay, and then just as they finish this application, I guess my biggest question is where would we like them to send their application? I put down our dev services email. That way it comes to our development services department and we'll get it and see it. And then
It's probably a question for staff. I think, does staff or the executive want to, set up a separate email entity that applications go to or something like that? So maybe talk about that internally and let us know what you guys would recommend.
Yeah, I'm inclined maybe to explore something new.
Yeah, I would think so too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is good. We made it through our level 1 application, I think. And so Annika, you'll clean this up with our feedback and input, and then you'll post a updated version for us. So I just want to acknowledge that we've hit our 5 o'clock time. I'm certainly willing to stay a little bit longer, but I don't know what other committee members have, or staff for that matter. So what, staff, what do you have any conflicts, or
Yeah, I'm okay.
we can go a little bit longer? Committee members okay with that? We'll
I think
just,
if we have a quorum and can work through a few more things, that would be good.
okay,
I only
Jody?
have about 10 minutes.
okay, all right.
I guess going forward, I think there's a lot more discussion on these weights than we
Yeah.
can do in 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
No, I think so too, and I think what would be good, I mean, if we only want to take another 10 or 15 minutes, what I would suggest, you know, let's make sure we touch on, you know, our next meeting and agenda and that sort of thing, but we can talk at least in general, and maybe start discussing things in detail, but circle back to it. I think that my take on the original Lisa type scoring and sort of the next evolution of that, what I envision for this process is that somebody's going to fill out this 2-page stage 1 application, and then if as a committee we agree that some sort of Lisa or similar initial scoring program makes sense. I mean, the idea in my mind is it's kind of a hands-off sort of effort that involves, you know, technology, GIS, and county staff processing this first round of applications, and it spits out a score or some feedback that then comes to us as a big list, and, you know, the committee sort of looks through that, and given the context is going to decide, you know, all these applications can be invited to go to stage 2, or we have so many, or there's certain projects that don't seem like they fit, you know, the type of county funding that we all envision. And then it goes to a second stage, more detailed, where there's some serious scrutiny and weighting and that sort of thing going on, which is represented by this other tab. So that's how I envision sort of this conservation easement process going. And then separately, the sort of that third tab in the evaluation criteria is an application for trail corridor, which really is a different beast altogether because, first of all, it's not a conservation easement. And second of all, we're looking to purchase either fee title or a right-of-way easement through a property or multiple properties likely. And so
Held by a municipality that's already set up to do that.
Exactly. That sort of thing. So that's kind of it's really a separate process. I think Eric chimed in today with his emails and talked about, you know, we've passed $20 million. Should the committee, you know, in general at this point say, we want to take 10% of that or $2 million and focus it on trail corridors, and the other 18 million is on the conservation easement application and program, that sort of thing. So I think.
Not hard and fast.
Right. Doesn't have to be hard and fast. We can start with that, or maybe we don't need that sort of criteria and we just put it out there. But I think the trail application is different from the conservation easement application. They're just different beasts.
You mentioned trail corridors. Is that separate from the highway corridors?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay, so one thing that, as you brought that up, that comes to my mind is there's a little bit that we could do as a design build type thing where we're getting stuff out there as we build stuff. In other words, if this application is fairly close, perhaps, from this discussion that we've had, if that gets out there while we're building, we don't have to finalize this before we get to
open up the application.
Like the level 1 stage. So I'm just saying some of this stuff we could show progress as a committee, because I'm getting asked questions like Jack Draxler that was on the thing. He's like, I've got people that want to do applications. I don't know where to send them. There's nothing coming from your group. It'd be great to say, okay, there's that. We're in the meantime, we're continuing to work forward. We could possibly, we're not that far, I think, from getting the municipalities the trail application. And then we're hands off on that while we kind of maybe even build a few other things, right?
Yeah.
And we're making progress towards that. I mean, I see we're pretty close to the 3 months away from the our anniversary of passing this. It'd be nice to have all that stuff out there.
Right, so the question maybe before the committee is, you know, how do folks feel about, you know, if we're getting close to approving sort of this level 1 application and maybe then follow up with sort of this stage 1 scoring process, how do folks feel about getting that information out and letting the process start while we work more diligently on, you know, sort of the second stage stuff? What do you think? Because I guess the point is, we're not making any commitments on anything. We're just opening the application period while we're continuing to work on these things in an effort to do 2 things. One, show we're making progress, and 2, that we're also, for us, gauging interest, right? Like, if we open up the application process and there's only 2, Garth Baxter and somebody else, then, you know we've got time to work on the other stuff. But what if folks do? I guess the question is, does that sound like a reasonable pathway, or do you feel like we've got to kind of get all these things figured out and blessed? And
This is what's gonna happen. Garth's gonna walk in the door and he says, I wanna do a conservation easement, I want funding. Where do you go from there? What do you tell him? Because he's gonna do that.
yeah,
Well,
What are you gonna tell him?
we're going to tell him that
Currently
we'll let you
accepting
know
applications.
when you can apply to stage 2. That's what I would think.
Tell him to go get a conservation easement first with the land trust or somebody else. Tell him to do that first. And then start your phase 2 of what you want to do. And part of that is, have you had this done yet?
can we look at this application and say if it's even worth his time to go do that? In other words, I don't even know how he scores on our Lisa thing. I don't know what his land is. I don't know anything. Can't we wait and tell him, you know, you really don't meet the objective, or you do meet the objective, go get a land conservation easement.
Yeah, you're gonna.
Go get a sponsor.
Yeah, go get a sponsor.
Yeah, that's probably the way to go, because
Yeah.
he's gonna come in and he's gonna bring his brother in here, and they want to split the property, and they want to do all this stuff. You're gonna have to deal with that first. But if they start the conservation easement first application,
Yeah.
that'll get rid of a lot of issues you have. That's
Right.
step 1.
Right.
And then now have your line of stuff, okay, we want to, have you done a conservation easement? What do you talk about this? And some of the things we just talked about, you go down the list and then agree, go down that list and say, okay, we've done this so far. And then continue down the path of what we know at that point.
I'm personally not concerned about an applicant coming in here and pressuring us to do something. I feel confident in our committee members that, we'll do our due diligence, and we're going to be great stewards of taxpayer funding here. So that doesn't concern me, but there may be other reasons that committee members feel like we should get all this fleshed out and sort of figured out before we open the door. I see some advantages to gauging the interest.
I guess I'm going to speak for the staff. We got to remember that this all has to be approved by the county commissioners, et cetera. I think they will want to see it kind of roughed out, at least in a straw man perspective, before we start accepting applications.
But we could say this is going to be our level 1. We're working on the
But
other.
I still think even your level 1 needs to go to the county
Sure.
commission.
The answer, you're right. The county council is going to need to approve, I think, any of this stuff. And we're going to, let's say if this level 1 application, as edited and agreed to today, is acceptable, we're going to formally, we'll take a vote and we'll make a recommendation to the county council, I think, if that's the way the process should work, that they approve this level 1 application. And we can either do that, you know, each of these sequentially, or I think Eric's concern is, do we wait and get everything together and take the time, and we're another 6 months out or something
I
like
think
that?
that question needs to be decided by the county council, not us.
Yeah, that may be right. I mean,
But we
their
could take
answer.
this and say, this is one way we can do
Yep.
it. Would you like us to propose this?
And I think we can, they're either going to say yes or no, right?
But I think that's their decision more than ours.
And Catherine's not here today as a representative for the council. Otherwise, we'd be asking her these questions, or let her talk to the council members and say how they would feel. But I do think over our next couple of meetings, we're going to have a few things ready,
Yeah.
I think, that we could start talking about.
And I think I could get comfortable over the next couple of meetings, but today, I haven't seen enough to where I'm saying, yeah, giddy up, let's go.
Yeah, I think if anything, we maybe have pretty good agreement on the level 1 application, but nothing else, and that's, I think we at least want our stage 1 scoring for both trails and for conservation easements to be agreed upon before.
But I think one other thing, I agree with, is it Dave?
Yeah, Dave.
I agree. I think at least our stage 1 right now, they need to have an approved sponsor before, because if they don't have an approved sponsor, let's just let them get that approved sponsor. You know, somewhere down the line, I think we can put our own criteria together if they don't have that. But without that right now, they're wasting their time and our time.
Yeah, and I think that'll be obvious when we get the application, and if they say no, they don't have that representation, you know,
Would
we're
the
gonna.
county ever be the easement holder?
County can be.
We can be, but I don't know that we would be.
Yeah,
Because
exactly, but they can.
they can,
And Division
but
of Wildlife can be.
we don't have staff we don't have funding for
They
that.
don't do it right now.
So, and we don't have a Parks and Recreation Department, for
Well,
example.
we'll need to be somebody else for easements, but not for other types of sponsorship that we might do. I don't know, were we anticipating it will be 90% easements, or?
Yeah. But I am aware of a fee simple, very good opportunity. And, I mean, I think we have to be open to the fact that that could be the case. Meaning if we tell everybody to go get that, there's exceptions.
There are exceptions, and we need to stay open to those.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying close those out, but to get something out in front of people right now, that's actually a quicker way to say, you know, if it has the UDAP or UDAF?
UDAF, yeah.
UDAF support, then I think, yeah, we can move a lot quicker through this. So if we are just saying we want to participate, from a banking standpoint, being the lead bank versus a participating bank, it's a big difference in the amount of work and everything else. And that's what we're talking about here is, are we going to be a lead or are we going to be a participant?
Yeah, and I think, not to exclude an opportunity to be the lead, I think almost 9 times out of 10 will be a participant.
But right, and I'm not against being the lead, but there's a lot more due diligence that we need to, and infrastructure we need to have than we have right now.
Yeah. One thing, Wasatch has never closed a thing yet.
County.
You know, they're in that situation. I think we need to recognize, one, we might see very little. Whatever we can do not to create this bureaucratic mess for everybody that comes in here, I think is pretty important. If we actually want to get what we want to get. Or will be Wasatch County not having a single thing done for our taxpayers that wanted this done.
Yeah.
Number 2, I think this is something we ought to consider. I heard back from the county commission, the county chair of Summit County, and they actively pursue certain properties that were identified by their open space board. So, I mean, we know that people were electing it based on a certain thing. That's something. I just think that we need to make it so that things happen, not that we kind of create, we look very governmental in the process.
One of the reasons that what we learned today, the UDAF, the reason it's UDAF and they went agricultural, because when Quality Growth Commission came in and we want to do conservation easements, they had all kinds of them, lots of them, different types of people. And they couldn't control that situation or make decisions based on that, even though they had a 10-person board. You know, it's the same conversation we're having, is we all have different reasons about that. And that's became the problem, and that's why they went to UDAF, is to get away from trimming it down so they can make decisions based on that. And they had so many problems and dealing with funds, taxpayer funds, it became a real issue of how do we decide how we do this. So I think that's important that we don't end up in that same scenario, and I think we're moving in that direction with things you're talking about. Let's narrow it down and make decisions based on that, but let's have the information that we get from other people to do that. And that's, I think, important so we don't have that same scenario.
Okay, well, great discussion. I think as far as our next meeting agenda, suggestions for sponsoring agency presentations, Annika. So I think, you know, there could be opportunities for like Bear River Land Conservancy, Nature Conservancy, Utah Open Lands.
Yeah, and so my question is that, are there specific groups you want to hear from first that you think will be more helpful in this stage?
Good question. And let me just add, like Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Trout Unlimited.
I think we need
all
some
those.
breadth. These two have been agriculture, and I think
Yes.
we need some breadth. Let's see what the whole range is.
Yeah, I like that too.
Trust for Public Lands,
Yep.
Forest Legacy.
Yes.
We're waiting for this room.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jody.
Okay, and I think we'll just maybe do one of those or postpone those, because we do have a training that the committee needs to get done.
Okay,
So we'll do that next meeting.
and that takes how long?
So we're just gonna do the Open Public Meetings Act training that we're required to do, and we can do it in 10 minutes.
Great, awesome. So I noticed on the meeting schedule, our next meeting is August 21st, and then September 4th is Labor Day, so we need an alternate September date. What do folks, and if we continue with the same sequencing, if I'm not,
I propose 1 week later.
so that would be the 11th. Would that be conflicting with anything on staff? And then our regular one would be on the 18th?
Yeah.
So the 11th and 18th maybe for September meetings? We can kind of pencil in, and if you all would, if you're able to reserve those dates, we'll plug through a couple more meetings in September. But I think at our next meeting, August 21st, a little bit of training, maybe one organization, and then we'll plan to sort of try and hammer through maybe this first round scoring evaluation. And so take a look at Claire's email and my email with my thoughts, and please share your thoughts and feedback with committee members, and we'll have an informed.
Please don't take mine as determinative. That was
Like,
basically.
it was great because we're starting to have like a baseline to work with, and it moves faster. It was perfect.
It's good
Where we are.
stuff. Okay,
Bear River Land Conservancy, I think, just because they're local would be interesting.
okay, great. All right, without objection, we'll stand adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Appreciate all your work.
I'll be sanctioned.
I broke the desk here.